veterans of wars and military conflicts. Military of Reserve. It's time to unite. In the name of peace. Against wars. For life. The International Advisory Committee of Organizations of Reserve Officers and Megapure Film present.
Первая мировая война взорвала добротно-тихую купеческую жизнь. Гигантская мясорубка фронта втягивала в себя и пережевывала все лучшее, что люди создали.
The First World War. Its lessons were not studied entirely. Many mistakes were repeated in the period from 1941 to 1945, and some are still to be considered. On its scope, it was an unprecedented cataclysm that took away millions of lives. 4 years of hostilities killed more than 10 million soldiers and 12 million civilians. More than 55 million people were injured, which resulted in immeasurable social and economic consequences and human suffering. It's well known that the First World War broke out on the 28th of July 1914, and this year we are going to celebrate its centenary. Studying history and drawing conclusions from the First World War consequences for the present time was of vital importance for us. The International Scientific and Practical Conference, the First World War, Causes, Lessons, Conclusions, and Nowadays, dedicated to the First World War centenary, was held from the 23rd to the 26th of April 2014 in Belgrade, the capital of the Republic of Serbia. The International Advisory Committee of Organizations of Reserve Officers representatives from Austria, Bulgaria, Hungary, Spain, Israel, Kazakhstan, Macedonia, Norway, the Republic of Serbia, Russia, Slovakia, Ukraine and Montenegro arrived in Belgrade. Delegations from the World Veteran Federation and public organizations officials from Albania, Greece, Turkey and France took part in the conference as well. Why was the conference held in Serbia? Because it was Serbia that saw the beginning of the First World War. And now scientists from various countries have different interpretations for the war reasons. President of Serbia, Tomislav Nikolic, welcomed the conference participants at his residence of Novi Dvor. In compliance with the International Advisory Committee's decision, the President was awarded the committee's highest knighthood order for special merits to support veterans, strengthen peace and consent. We had a fruitful exchange of views, had a meeting with Tomislav Nikolic, the President of Serbia, and decorated him with the IC's most distinguished knighthood order. Then he met with our delegation to touch upon tasks facing our organization. The order was handed out by President of the International Advisory Committee, Alexander Kanchin, and Chairman of the Executive Committee of the Club of Generals and Admirals of Serbia, Vidoje Pantelic. The Serbian people share a very cordial attitude to Russia and the Russians. They remember our history. It is noteworthy that the First World War broke out to a large extent because Russia had always supported and defended fraternal Serbia. It backed our brothers both during the First and the Second World Wars. Eternal glory to the heroes who gave their lives for freedom and independence of the Serbian people. On the eve of the conference, in the framework of the International Advisory Committee of Organizations of Reserve Officers, a number of important meetings and events were held. Issues of further geographical extension and the development of the cooperation format of the International Advisory Committee were discussed at the meeting of the committee and its Regional Council of Organizations of Southeastern Europe, which took place in Belgrade on the 24th of April. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as veterans we know that along with war humanity faces with horror, and that is why we should all join common efforts taken by the international community and all those who sincerely, as we do, strive for equality, mutual respect and freedom in the world. Speaking at the meeting, Chairman of the Club of Generals of Slovakia, Major General František Blanarik, Chairman of the Union of Officers and Surgeons of Reserve of the Republic of Bulgaria, Lieutenant General Stoyan Topalov, Yuri Donskoy, Ukraine, Vice President of the World Veteran Federation, Dan Vigo Bergton and others, unanimously noted that the International Advisory Committee, which had been established 3 years ago, became instrumental in establishing international relations and developing peace and friendship. Despite the tense situation in the world, the IAC keeps on extending its membership and influence. A new organization has joined the IAC, namely the French Federation of Veterans of Foreign Missions, headed by Laurent Attard-Bayrou. Organizations from Albania, Romania and Turkey have expressed their interest in activities of our organization. Now, the IAC brings together 29 member organizations from 27 countries. At the meeting of the IAC, the Russian side launched an initiative to establish an international military philosophical society. Moreover, the draft of the International Festival of Films and TV programs for a world without wars and military conflicts was discussed and submitted. We have decided to establish the International Military Philosophical Society in the framework of the IAC to carry out similar conferences and roundtable meetings within the international scientific community. At the meeting of the IAC, there was taken a decision to hold a film festival with the working title For a World Without Wars and Military Conflicts. We call on journalists and anchors of TV programs to participate and unite their efforts and convey ideas of peace, countering terrorism and, above all, peacekeeping to a broad audience and everyone. The participants of the meeting of the Regional Council agreed that the initiatives of the International Advisory Committee are relevant in today's challenging environment. Scientists from different countries, prominent public figures will be able to freely express their opinions, share experiences and publish their articles. And the audience of different countries will become familiar with the best works of cinema and TV programs designed to create an atmosphere of peace, develop universal human values, strengthen international solidarity among reserve officers, and prevent wars and military conflicts.
And every time we have run into discussion about religion and politics, we never come to a conclusion. This is a very thin line, but if we can stay objective, I think this organization will be very, very fruitful in the future.
Summing up the meeting, Alexander Kanchin noted that many of the initiatives of the International Advisory Committee, and particularly the upcoming scientific and practical conference, were of great practical importance. Our organization today unites more than 7 million reserve officers and generals, and we enjoy sufficient influence in each of our member states. The credibility is needed to exert influence on civil society, statesmen, decision-makers, and to express our opinions. I think our view will be set forth in tomorrow's final document of the conference. Immediately after the International Advisory Committee's meeting, the participants arrived at the Army House of the Serbian Republic in Belgrade for an official opening ceremony of the International Scientific and Practical Conference, the First World War, Causes, Lessons, Conclusions and Nowadays. Representatives from academic, non-governmental organizations and diplomatic corps have gathered today. Almost 30 countries participated in the event. The conference was attended by Minister of Defense of Serbia Nebojša Kinsman, Chief of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Serbia, General Ljubiša Diković, prominent scientists and political analysts and military commanders. Dedicated to the First World War centenary, the opening ceremony of the conference began with the Serbian national anthem performance, a gala concert and a stage art composition, and greetings given to guests and participants. The participants observed a minute of silent prayer to honor the memories of those fallen in all wars and armed conflicts. Over 20 people delivered speeches during the two-day discussions. A scientific analysis studied the causes of the First World War, its consequences and traits of the conduct of hostilities. On behalf of the Ministry of Defense of the Republic of Serbia and on my behalf, I am pleased to welcome you at this great scientific conference. When it comes to the First World War, people usually wonder what kind of experience could be gained from the war that broke out as far back as 100 years ago. But it turns out, as time goes by, many historical events can be analyzed better and more profoundly. Today's event is dedicated to the centenary of the outbreak of the First World War. I firmly believe all countries of the Southeastern Europe and nations of the Balkans desire and are capable of living and working together for peace and cooperation in the region. In his address, President of the International Advisory Committee, Alexander Kanchin, emphasized the inadmissibility of falsification of history. He also noted that the First World War had preconditioned the subsequent course of historical events, including the outbreak of the Second World War. This war became the biggest pivotal point in the world's history. In its scope, it was an unprecedented cataclysm which resulted in the loss of millions of lives. Only over 10 million military and more than 12 million civilians were killed and about 55 million were wounded. Though I think that during today's exchange of views, these numbers can be altered. Speakers also noted that the current situation in the present-day world encourages the international community to draw correct conclusions from the lessons of the world wars and conflicts. In particular, during his address, Professor Milan Richer, the Czech Republic, apologized to the Serbian people for irresponsible statements by former Czech President Václav Havel he made during the NATO bombing of Belgrade in 1999. It was dubbed as a humanitarian bombing of Yugoslavia. Allow us, on behalf of all members of the Civil Association of the Club of Czech Border Guards and Military Against War, apologize to the Serbian people for this statement. History puts everything in its places. This should be remembered both by politicians and ordinary people.
I would like to say thank you for your father, your grandfather, your grand-grandfather. Because now to France there is the peace, the democracy, the good economic. He come to France, give to the liberation to my country.
The war of 1914-1918 is much broader than all previous wars. That's why it was originally called the Great War. Never before have there been so many conflicting countries, winners and losers, and such a huge damage from the war is still to be covered by the defeated. Those who think that the past relates only to archaeological theme are badly mistaken. They are under the delusion, because whoever controls archives controls history. Here I would like to draw your attention to several important aspects concerning Serbia and the overall picture of the First World War. If the First World War was known as the Great War, then what was the Second World War? Perhaps it was the Mega War. The great powers, primarily European ones, Russia, Britain, France, Austria-Hungary, and to a lesser extent Prussia, i.e. Germany, were in charge of it. The central military confrontation in the Balkans became a major part of the Great World War. We can draw a conclusion that today there exist parallel trends. On the one hand, the First World War lessons have been acknowledged, and on the second hand, we are witnessing the revival of politics covered by a scientific discussion. Under new conditions, some states demonstrate willingness to abolish the last remains of the Versailles Treaty in justice and to set forth a compromise version that wouldn't be so damaging for new Europe. The second day of the conference began with the laying of wreaths at the Unknown Hero Memorial, dedicated to the victims of the First World War and those fallen in the Balkan Wars. The monument is located on Avala Mount in the vicinity of Belgrade. When the International Advisory Committee takes part in events in foreign states, by a good tradition we pay tribute to those died in the struggle for the liberation of their country from fascism. I was impressed to see veterans peacekeepers from Norway and France put on their blue berets and white gloves, laid flowers and saluted. It was very solemn, and their profound respect to the ceremony and the events of the First World War was clearly seen. I realized how important it was for them to promote the ideas of peacekeeping and participate in events carried out by the international organizations. According to the participants, the main outcome of the conference was that through understanding the historical memory of this tragedy, the international community could realize that the only way to save the world and millions of human lives was to use all the instruments of political, economic and diplomatic measures to resolve various international conflicts and disputes. In the 1915-1916, Russia, of course, was very close to victory. Why it didn't win the First World War is another question, and I won't touch upon it.
Peace treaties after war must not create the cause of the following wars. No war needed anymore to solve the problems. Just communicate with other
We have a right here to participate in a very important conference dedicated to the First World War. This topic is of great importance for many countries because each state lost so many lives in this war. The First World War theme is of keen interest as one of the most significant events in the world history. The First World War theme is of keen interest as one of the most significant events in the world history.
участников этой войны.
I feel that we have been talking to each other. Most of us here in this, we are suffering from the same consequences. I wished if we could have next time 2 or 3 representatives from those main countries actually to listen to us, to reach a conciliation, if not reaching to understanding.
At the end of the conference, its participants discussed prospects of further cooperation in the framework of the International Advisory Committee of Organizations of Reserve Officers and submitted a final document of the conference. They appealed to heads of states and governments, public, veterans and youth organizations, and the international community. We are holding the conference because different viewpoints, clashes of opinions are very important for all of us. Scientists always say that truth is born of arguments. At the beginning of the conference, we talked about figures. However, the final document reflects slightly different data, which is natural, because archives of individual states rely upon their own information. What's significant for us is objective information, so as to say uncut facts and figures. In a ceremonial atmosphere, medals and memorable insignia of the International Advisory Committee and the Club of Generals and Admirals of Serbia were handed over to military leaders, representatives of government and public international organizations, scientists, and social activists who were directly involved in the organization of the socially significant events. The awards were presented by Alexander Kanchin and Vidoje Pantelic. The participants of the events in Belgrade expressed confidence that the conference and the meeting of the Regional Council of the South-East European countries of the International Advisory Committee marked an important step forward to develop the international movement and are a factor in the further strengthening of confidence among peoples, education of the younger generation in the spirit of tolerance, friendship and mutual respect.
I hope that all this audience here, the participants, will take with them to their country some of the ideas that were established here, and we can make some other steps to bring the peace to the world.
The theme and issues discussed during the event are extremely rare, however, they are relevant indeed. So I really appreciate the initiative, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to participate in the conference.
The lesson learned from the First World War, and my conclusion, I will tell from the beginning, is that the lesson learned from the wars and conflicts are extremely useful if the decision makers are accepting them.
Our position to contribute for the peace in the world, for all the problems that have today all the people in the world. In the future, very, very active member of this committee.
Attending today's conference is very important for me. We have met a lot of important people, scientists from different fields, and we learned a lot in this seemingly complicated subject.
Mogu da kažem da je tema izabrana.
This war became an unprecedented one. We are still studying many of its consequences and lessons and faced with a range of questions about its results. I would like to say that the conference was organized at the highest level, and it is of great importance for all participating countries. Everyone wants to live in peace at home, knowing that other countries are also at peace. I did not expect to hold the conference at such a high level. However, We have done it. We have had a great number of scientists with outstanding reports and presentations. I think it will take us more than a month to analyze the results of the conference. An attempt to find out objective reality of centenary-old events has always been a quintessence for any scientific conference. I think in this respect we have approached our goal.